Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, January 21st, 2016. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, Chris Colby, editor of beerandwinejournal.com, talks us through tips on hitting your target original gravity. If you're in the middle of brewing and find you're off course, how do you get back on track? If you're new to home brewing and would like to get into the hobby for the first time, check out our website, basicbrewing.com, where you can find archives of our audio and video podcasts and our DVDs to walk you through basic and more advanced brewing techniques. And if you buy any of our DVD combos, you get a free Basic Brewing bottle opener. And don't forget to get a fresh copy of our Brewer's Logbook for 2016. You can use it to log and track up to 50 batches of beer. You can follow me on Twitter. My username is Basic Brewing, all one word. We also have a Basic Brewing Radio and Basic Brewing Video page on Facebook at facebook.com/basicbrewing. Thanks again to everybody clicking on the Amazon.com associate link on our basicbrewing.com site. Whenever you think of Amazon shopping, think of us first and click on our associate link. It won't cost you any extra, and you'll be helping us to bring you the show, and we greatly appreciate your support. We also have associate links for Brew Your Own magazine and the American Homebrewers Association on our site as well. You can find our Basic Brewing iPhone app on iTunes, our Android app on Amazon.com. We have a Windows phone app. We're on the BlackBerry podcast directory, and we're on the Stitcher app as well. If you want to put a tip in our tip jar, some coinage in our guitar case, so to speak, you can go to basicbrewing.com/support. Thanks to everybody who's done so already. And if you contribute via the support link, I'll send you an email with links to this year's bonus video showing Steve making Kansas City burnt ends out of chuck roast and cooking up his personal barbecue sauce recipe to go along with it. One of my goals in the near future is to make that recipe myself in my own smoker. Let's look into the mailbag, shall we? If you remember last time, Matt from San Antonio was having trouble getting a big Christmas beer to bottle condition and to carbonate properly. And I threw the question out there to y'all, and I asked you what you'd suggest, and I got some good responses. Paul from Melbourne, Australia writes, I've had a similar problem to Matt's when I brewed an imperial stout, which wouldn't carbonate. I kept it nice and warm, talked nice to it, begged, pleaded, and swore at it, but no good. I did as you suggested and waited in all for about 10 months or so, and the longer I waited, the more nothing happened. Paul says, so what I ended up doing was to open up every last bottle of a 5-gallon batch, tipped it all back into the fermenter, and pitched a pack of rehydrated champagne yeast. It's a fairly neutral yeast, so it shouldn't affect the character of the beer, and it's important it's happy in a high alcohol environment. At that point, I had nothing to lose, so I figured it's worth a go. Paul says, I don't remember the numbers, but the gravity did come down some more, and after a couple weeks, I rebottled it. At bottling, I added new carb tabs because that sugar had probably been eaten up by the champagne yeast. Anywho, long story short, after some more bottle conditioning, it was fine. This is my last resort before throwing the beer out because really, who wants to drink 5 gallons of flat stout? I'm rapt that it worked, and hopefully Matt would have the same luck. Appreciate that, Paul. Greg writes in with this. I had a Russian Imperial Stout take 3 months to carb up. Same thing for a few barley wines. I opened half the bottles of the Russian Imperial Stout and added a few grains of champagne yeast as it's high alcohol tolerant. Careful with this, though, because it metabolizes maltodextrins, which may be under-attenuated depending on the main yeast used, leading to an overcarbed beer. Greg says the extra yeast didn't seem to help or hinder the beer at all. After about 3 months or so, the Russian Imperial Stout is beautifully carbonated, and I wouldn't say there is noticeable difference between the bottles with added yeast and those without. Interesting. Greg says, my suggestion for Matt is just to give it time. So both sides of the fence there on the giving it time advice. Then there's this from Chris. I had the same problem with a Belgian double I brewed. I successfully carved the beer by adding 1/16 of a teaspoon of Lallemand cask and bottling yeast to every bottle. Then I recapped and inverted the bottles for a month. This seems to act as a conical fermenter and lets all the sugar fall to a smaller area. Interesting. Chris says, I wanted to let you know that the yeast for the double was harvested from bottles including all 10 Trappist yeast strains. Interesting. Chris says, I have a podcast called The Curioso, where we discussed Trappists and sampled a beer from each monastery. I called the beer Munkenstein. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate that. Chris says he's planning to be at the National Homebrewers Conference in Baltimore in June. So, Chris, I hope to run into you there. Let's talk about our sponsors before we get into the meat of the matter. Desiree and Dave of High Gravity in Tulsa. And I know I've mentioned in the past that Desiree and Dave have a background in computers and such, and it really shows in the design of their website, highdgravitybrew.com. For instance, the Build Your Own Beer feature lets you select all your ingredients from one page, and I'm talking everything, including yeast, priming options, fruit flavorings, and purees. And you can even name your beer on that page, and the site keeps a running total right there at the bottom of your window that's always visible, so you can kind of keep track of where you are. At highdgravitybrew.com, you can easily reorder your ingredients from your account management page, and you can also create a Get Me This registry to let friends and family know what you would like for your birthday, Father's or Mother's Day, or the holidays. And to top it all off, High Gravity is offering $7.99 flat rate shipping on most items. So check all of that out, along with their wonderful electric brewing systems. Check all out at highdgravitybrew.com. Okay, we talk a lot about advanced topics and concepts here on the show, but every now and then it's good to step back and cover the basics. Manipulating the original gravity of your wort is something that's essential to understand if you want to have control over your final product. And Chris Colby is writing a series on hitting your gravity target for beerandwinejournal.com, and he gives us a preview. Chris Colby, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
Hey, James. Thanks for having me on the show.
We're easing closer and closer to March.
We are.
Are you getting excited about New Zealand?
Oh, yeah. Gonna see some hobbits.
I got my passport, and the most unfortunate part of that experience was that I had my old passport from 20 years ago, and oh my goodness, the difference in the pictures. Just depressing. So let's talk about more cheerful things than my rapidly aging self. We're going to talk about original gravity today, and should we start very basic and lay some groundwork? What is your premise today?
Yeah, the basic idea is I've got a series of articles that I'm going to put on Beer and Wine Journal, and it's going to be what to do on your brew day if you fail to hit your target original gravity. You know, there are plenty of things you do ahead of time to try to hit your original gravity. You know, taking your extract efficiency and calculating how much grain you'll need. You know, that sort of stuff. And there's you want to grind to the same degree that you did last time and all that stuff. But I'm talking about when the wort's in the kettle and you suddenly realize, oh no, usually the problem is short, but it could be over too. You're not going to hit your target original gravity. What do? That's the premise.
And what are the factors? Why wouldn't we be hitting our target original gravity?
It could be any number of things. If your crush is off, if the grain is old, if malt is a biological product and it varies. If your last bag of grain had, say, potential extract of 39 gallons per pound, and this one is 37. So just changes in the malt specifications. Anything. If you're trying to rush through sparging, if you're continuous sparging, fly sparging, and you rush through it, maybe you don't rinse as the grain bed as thoroughly. yeah, or maybe you made a measurement error when you added your grain and it didn't add enough, or added too much. There are endless number of reasons why you can miss, and there are certainly an endless number of reasons why you can miss by a fairly small margin, of which the grain changing and small measurement issues and differences in the crush, and the grain mill can sort of go out of alignment pretty easily if you don't check it every time you crush, that sort of thing.
And I've also done some boneheaded things like added too much water in the process,
Sure.
especially if you're doing something like brewing a bag, where you add all of your brewing water at once at the beginning of the process. If you add like a gallon too much in the beginning, well, there you go. Your original gravity is going to be too low.
Yeah, or if your pH is off, if you're brewing a different kind of beer and your water isn't really suited towards it, and you haven't adjusted your water. Or one thing, and I have an article about this. Another thing a lot of homebrewers do is they collect the same volume of wort every single time. Like if they're making a 5-gallon batch, they collect between 6 and 6.5 gallons, and then boil for 60 to 90 minutes. And they'll do that for a pale ale, but then they'll do the same thing for a barley wine. And the thing is, when you collect 6.5 gallons of wort from 10 or 11 pounds of grain to make a pale ale, you've pretty much completely rinsed, sparged the grain bed. But if you collect 6.5 gallons from 24 pounds of grain, you've left a lot of sugars behind, and then they'll boil it down and they'll go, hey, I didn't hit my target gravity, because they should have collected 10 gallons and boiled it down to 5, that sort of thing. So that's another. Some homebrewers who do that notice that their efficiency gets progressively worse for bigger and bigger beers, and that's simply because they are collecting the same amount of wort from ever increasingly large grain beds for bigger beers.
So if you're a brewer and you're standing around the brew pot, how do you know that there's a problem, first of all?
Okay, what you want to do is check. You should have your kettle calibrated. You should have like either a sight glass on the side, or much more likely you'll just have a long spoon that you've got put hash marks on that use as a dipstick and tells you how much wort you have in your kettle. So you'll know the volume of wort you have in your kettle. Then just take a hydrometer reading or a refractometer reading of the specific gravity, and there you have the volume and the concentration, and what your final volume is going to be. If you're making a 5-gallon batch, it's going to be 5 gallons, or if it's a little over that, or whatever your target volume is. So basically, you use the equation from chemistry: CV equals CV, concentration times volume equals concentration times volume. And you would take your pre-boil volume, your pre-boil specific gravity equals C, which would be what you were looking for, times your target post-boil volume, which, let's say 5 gallons, that's common. And so you just solve for C, and that'll tell you what your specific gravity is. And when you do this, you either want to do it at Plato, or just, quote unquote gravity points, the last 3 digits on specific gravity. Specific gravity is usually reported as 1 point something something something, and so the something 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 is gravity points. So 1.048 or 1048, as some people would call it, is 48 gravity points. And so basically, you could know from measuring your pre-boil specific gravity what your post-boil specific gravity is going to be.
So let's have an example. Let's say 6.5 gallons times 40. Say you got a wort with a pre-boil volume of 1040. So 6.5 times 40 equals 260. If you then divide that by 5 gallons, being your final volume, then you get 52. So you would get an original gravity going into the fermenter of around 1.052.
Yeah. And
so,
actually,
simple.
40 is actually a good number there, just as an aside, because if you completely sparge a grain bed, like you sparge until you get to the point where further sparging would release excess tannins, the wort you collect is going to be right in that ballpark between 40 and 44 usually. So, and that's sort of another way you can tell if you've collected enough wort from the entire grain bed is your pre-boil kettle wort should be about 40 to 44 gravity points.
So we're sipping our beer by the by the kettle. We've collected our all grain wort, and well, I guess we could talk about extract as well. So we have our wort pre boil, so we can collect the pre-boil gravity and the pre-boil volume, and we can figure out if we're going to be in the ballpark of where we want to be at the end of the boil, assuming that you know your boil off rate. And that's an important thing. Another reason to take good notes with your system is because you can predict how much water that you're going to lose to steam over the course of, say, an hour-long boil.
Mm-hmm.
So we can make assumptions of what the volume is going to be afterwards. So we can do a little math and figure out if we're on target or if we're not. So if we aren't on target, if we're not going to, if we're just not going to have as much gravity, as much sugar concentration at the end of our boil, what are our options?
Yeah, your options are sort of, if you approach it from like a decision tree, one of your options is just not to worry about it. Say, well, I screwed up. I'm gonna have a different original gravity. So one option is do nothing. The second option is do something. If you choose do something, you've got a couple different options depending on whether you're high, like you overshot and your wort's too thick, quote unquote, or if your original gravity is low. If you're low, the easiest thing to do is just add a sufficient amount of malt extract near the end of the boil to bring your original gravity to where you want it to be. I know a lot of homebrewers just keep a bag of dried malt extract around, for making yeast starters and various things. And if you're close but far enough away that you do want to adjust your beer to what it should have been, some light or pale dried malt extract is just a thing, and you can just go into your most people use brewing software these days. Just go in there and figure out how much you need to add. So that's the easiest route when you've undershot. The slightly harder route is to realize you can continue to boil below your target post-wort volume. You can boil the wort down to the point where you hit your original gravity. Like, let's say you're off by a significant amount, and you hit let's say you hit 5 gallons and your wort is at 1048 and you wanted it to be at 1056. Well, use the CV equals CV equation again. Take, you've got 5 gallons at 48 and you want the wort at 56. What volume do you need there? So plug those in, figure out the volume you need to boil your wort down to hit your specific gravity. And that's also simple, but you also need to adjust your hop charges. Your boil is going to be longer in length, so the timing of them is going to change too, in terms of how long from the front of the boil they are. But you're also going to, and again, use your brewing software to scale them down proportionally. And that either way works. The second way is if you don't have malt extract on hand, or if you're, an all grain purist, I'm not going to add malt extract to my beer, just boil it down. So those are the two things to do for undershooting.
So let's talk about these in a little more detail. First of all, let's go backwards. If you have 5 gallons, at 1048, so that's 5 times 48 equals 240, and you say you want your target gravity to be 1050. So you would divide, or what would you want your target to be?
56 is what I said.
Okay. So 240 divided by 56 equals 4.3, essentially. 4.2857.
Right.
So you want to boil down to where you got like 4.25 gallons. And we're using, we're not using metric measurements, but the same principle applies if you're using metric measurements as well, right?
Sure. Yeah. Just the units change, not the math. And then for your hop charges, you'd have that 4 point whatever number. Take that and divide it by 5, and you'd get a percentage. Multiply that percentage by the amount of hops you plan to add, and that would tell you how to scale them down proportionally.
And we would with this, I assume that this would also apply if you're adding adjunct ingredients like Belgian candy syrup or sugar as well.
Oh yeah. Anything you could add. I mean, you could add just sugar to your kettle too to bring it up instead of malt extract, if that's what you were doing. Although that's the previous example.
That would tend to dry out your beer probably.
You'd hit your original gravity, but your final gravity would be a little lower than you expected.
Now let's talk about the malt extract. How do you figure out? Is there an easy way without using brewing software? Is there an easy way to use that the gravity point formula to figure out how much malt extract to add to say 5 gallons of beer?
Yeah, if you know the potential extract of malt extract, which for dried malt extract is 45 gallons per pound, or in other words, if you have a pound of malt extract, you dilute it in a gallon of water, it's going to be 1045, 1.045 specific gravity. So from there, you can figure, if you're, just as a proportion of 45, you got 5 gallons, and how short are you, and to scale that.
And liquid malt extract is more dilute, so it's got a lower. It will add fewer gravity points to the equation.
Yeah, it tends to hover around 37. There are different ones. Some of them are as low as 33, but usually 37 gallons per pound. So that a pound of liquid malt extract in a gallon of water, it generally makes a 1037 or 1.037 specific gravity wort.
And the opposite, if you've got a gravity that's too high, if you boiled too long, say, if you got distracted, or if the boil intensity was more than you anticipated, if you've got a brand new, spiffy electric brewing system, and it boils more aggressively than you thought, you might wind up with a higher gravity wort than you expected.
Yeah, in the case of if you boil too long and you're too high, that's easy. Just add water. But if you can also be too high. When you use the CB equation, when you've got your pre-boil volume, like maybe if your extract efficiency is just great. Like let's say you've got. Let's say you've collected your full pre-boil volume of wort, and you're already basically at what you want your post-boil, specific gravity to be. Once again, the solution is water. Just add water to the beer to expand it so that your pre-boil volume is going to continually go up, but there'll be the point where boiling it down to some volume greater than you expected will hit your target original gravity. In that case, though, you'll need to scale up the amount of hops that you add because you're yielding more beer. And sometimes that's not possible. Like if you're learning, say, all grain brewing, and you suddenly like you suddenly hit that point where everything comes together and your efficiency jumps by 10%. Maybe you're making a fairly big beer at the time. You might not have room in your kettle to add water, but if you did, that would be the thing to do. If you didn't, I don't know what you do. Scoop some of the wort out and get a second kettle. find a big pot somewhere.
Call your neighbors.
Yeah.
Bring spaghetti pots. So we can work the formula backwards. Say if we have 5 gallons of wort at 1065, so 5 times 65. 5 times 65 equals 325, and say we wanted our original gravity to be 1050, so we would divide 325 by 50, and that gives us 6.5. So we would need a volume of 6.5 gallons to reach our target original gravity of 1050.
Yes. And then you'd also want to take 6.5 divided by 5, take that fraction, which would be something, it would be 1 point something, and multiply the amount of all your hops by that, and that would tell you how much more hops you needed to add, assuming you're adding them at the same point from the same amount of time from the end of the boil.
Right. Is there potentially any disadvantage to, say, boiling longer to reach a target specific gravity? Will we have to worry about darkening of wort?
Sure. If you if you expected to boil, say, 6 gallons down to 5 gallons and be done, but you find out you're going to miss it, and let's say you have to boil down to 4.5 or down to 4 or something like that. Yeah, your wort could pick up a little bit of extra color from the longer time it needed to boil. Probably not much, though. Honestly, if the boil gets extended only by a half hour or so, or even an hour, it's not the sort of thing that's going to turn a Pilsner into a brown, a brown Pilsner, if there were such a thing. But it might turn a straw colored. If you were brewing a very, very light beer, it might turn a straw-colored beer into a pale beer with a hint of golden in it, something like that. It would be very small, unless you turned up the heat enough that you were actually scorching the wort, which is that's a whole secondary consideration. But just normal boiling, yeah, the longer you go, you're going to develop more color, but it's not going to be in the terms of, unless you're way off in hitting your original gravity, need to boil for a lot longer. The sort of extending it by a half hour is not going to, it's not going to shift your beer color enough really to worry about.
And this is a good argument for taking measurements before the boil, volume and gravity, so that if there is something going on, if you are planning on adding bittering hops at the beginning of the boil, if you measure at the end of the boil and you're not at the proper gravity, well, it's too late to adjust your bittering hops because they happened like an hour ago.
Right. If you only discover that you've missed your target gravity at the end of the boil, you don't have the option of either adding water if you're over, or adding or boiling more because you've already added the hops. That's why take the pre-boil volume and specific gravity so you can know ahead of time. You can still at the end, if you're boiling down and you're low, you can always add malt extract. You can use that to kick save at the end, and you wouldn't have to have known the whole brew day. But for the other two, when you're changing the volume, you also change the amount of hops you need to add, and so those you need to have started the boil with some idea where you're going to end up.
This is pretty basic stuff, but it's important. And especially if you're getting into all grain brewing and you're playing things by ear as you're going along, this is something that you need to help you, kind of keep track of your beers and make sure that they turn out the way that you want them to. Yeah,
it's one of the things about becoming an advanced brewer and being good at it is, everyone can follow a recipe, or almost everybody, can follow a recipe and if things go well, you can plod through the steps and make good beer. But part of being a good brewer is that, something's gone wrong. Do you have the skill set to change things and make it go right? And actually, there's two interesting things about using the CB equals CB equation that advanced brewers might want to consider, but are generally like, I don't know, you don't need to worry about it because the differences are small. But one thing you might know if you've ever taken any sort of science class is that when you heat liquid, it expands, right? And when you cool it, it contracts. So when you're doing the CB equals CB equation, you're actually neglecting the fact that your pre-boil wort volume is going to be at boiling temperature, and your your batch volume, if you take it right then, is there's two ways to think about it. Either you're going to be comparing it to the chilled wort, or you need to compare it to the hot wort right at the end, and then assume that it's going to shrink by generally about 4% from boiling down to like ale temperatures or lager temperatures. So there's a slight volume adjustment there. But again, for homebrewers, it's either use the CB equals CB equation for boiling temperature wort at the beginning and boiling temperature at the end, or you could go the extra mile and make the little volume adjustment at the end if you're going to compare the pre-boil hot wort to post-boil chilled wort. And the second thing is specific gravity in your pre-boil wort is going to be how much sugar is dissolved, primarily how much sugar is dissolved in the wort, but other compounds dissolved in your wort also contribute to specific gravity, specifically proteins. And these are going to coagulate during the boil and drop out and no longer be a part of your specific gravity. So when you use that equation, you're neglecting the fact that some of the compounds that are included in the concentration in the first, in the pre-boil wort aren't going to be present in the final. So in other words, it leads you to overestimate slightly your post-boil volume. But the key word there is slightly. Because the wort is the amount of protein compared to the sugars is negligible, really. It's enough that as brewers we worry about it. We see it showing up as hot break, and it's part of part of brewing is you want to get malts that are low enough in protein, unless you're purposely brewing a wheat beer, that so you won't have haze and all that. But there's enough that it might be a point or two gravity difference, but probably closer to a point, and probably in most cases less than one gravity point in for a reasonable wort boil off.
Your point about the difference in volume between hot liquid and colder liquid is interesting. It's when you make a dipstick for your kettle and you're marking off your long spoon or whatever you're using to measure with, you're not going to be doing that with boiling
right.
water. So your dipstick is going to be measuring a little bit too much, probably. So you have to take that into account.
Yeah, if you stick your dipstick in the boiling wort and it says 5.0 gallons, according to that, by the time you cool down your wort, it's going to be a little less than that. So when I calibrated my system, it was all with room temperature water, and so you sort of mentally know as a brewer that this is slightly off, which direction it's off in, and you also know that the total amount is really not that much that at a homebrew scale you need to worry, that excessively about it.
And we're homebrewers, so we're not going to have to, report anything to the TTB about alcohol content or anything like that. So, pretty good ballparking is probably a good strategy for, homebrew measurements. If we can get in the ballpark and kind of get a general picture of where we are and what we're doing, that's probably good enough for most people, at least.
Yeah, and also if you brew similar beers all the time, and people do, like some people, maybe they only brew big beers, and some people are more into sort of normal strength beers or session beers or whatever. You do also, you hit, and if you take good notes every brew session and you do the same thing and you're careful about measurements, pretty soon everything starts falling into place and you start hitting everything a little bit closer. Your target volumes, your target gravities, you just get to learn the quirks of your system, and so, when, I remember when I first started all grain brewing, every brew was like an adventure. Like, what the hell is going to happen at the end of this? Brewing a bitter. Now it's a barley wine.
Oops.
Yeah. Or my imperial stout is got the OG of a dry stout. What do I do now? Just everything was like, oh crap, I need 2 gallons of water at 190 degrees in the next 2 minutes. What do I do? But if you take notes, and take notes, review them, and learn from them.
Yeah, it doesn't count if you never look at them again.
Which for me took years to figure that out. I took all these notes on brewing day, but like the next one came along and I just do the same thing as the previous. And it's like, oh wait, I could be actually learning from my experience. Like a monkey in the zoo.
What's that on the wall? Never mind. Yeah. Speaking of taking notes and making recipes and such as that, how's the book coming?
Done.
Woohoo!
Done.
Or at least your part's done.
Yeah. Most of my part. They're supposedly sending a photographer out to come photograph the art and photos so I don't know.
To like,
I hope they like cats. 101 beer recipe and their associated cat picture.
Cats are popular. People like cats. You've got 100 recipes. You don't have 100 cats yet. You've got to catch up before the photographer comes.
No, I do not. Each cat can star in 5 recipes, and that solves the problem.
Oh, well, that's exciting, and I'm sure a huge relief to have that deadline passed.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think I don't, I got to the end of this project and I actually thought it was good, which is like almost never happens. I'm serious. Like most of the times I do something, there'll be the idea and I'll think, hey, this is really cool. And by the end, I'll think like, oh my God, this sucks so hard. I can't even believe it. It's like I'm a failure and this is going to ruin me, but this, I got done with it and I pasted it. I thought, this is actually, it's got good recipes in it. It's got good sort of lessons along with each, I think homebrewers, homebrewers will enjoy it and learn from it and, become better brewers because of it.
Well, awesome. I'm certainly looking forward to it. And 1% of the recipes are mine.
Yeah.
meaning
actually, it's
one.
Like 0.9 something because I added one extra recipe, so now it's 101.
Oh.
But yeah, your Frankenberry Weiss is there in all its glory.
Which was a weird but tasty beer.
I liked it. You sent me a bottle of that once.
Well, there you go. I need to do that again. Well, all right, Chris. I'm sure that we'll talk again before March. But time speeds on.
So, we'll have a little bit of time in March to speak when we're on a
13-hour plane trip.
13-hour plane ride over to New Zealand.
We'll see if me and Andy Sparks are speaking to each other by the end of that.
Yeah.
It's like hanging wallpaper. It's an extreme test of your relationship.
Put a bet down on which one of us gets deep vein thrombosis first.
All right. Well, we will talk to you later, Chris.
Okay. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Well, thanks again to Chris. You can check out all of Chris's awesome articles on beerandwinejournal.com, and really looking forward to his recipe book, and we'll follow the progress of that book as it happens. Very exciting news for Chris. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to James at basicbrewing.com or fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com, and please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Check out our support link where you can throw a couple of bucks into the tip jar by subscribing financially to our podcasts. Be sure to check out our DVDs, Extract Brewing and Partial Mashing, Stepping into All Grain, Low-Tech Lagering and Decoction Mashing, and Introduction to Wine Kits. You can find them all on our site. You get a free Basic Brewing bottle opener with any DVD combo. You can check out our Basic Brewing shirts in the store as well. You can also find our logbooks, where you can track and log up to 50 batches of beer. You can see a listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com, and if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order them online in our online shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody who's continued to click on our Amazon.com link. We appreciate the support there. Our featured products this week that were purchased through the link are First Alert 2037F Fire and Water File Chest and Instant Pot 7-in-1 Programmable Pressure Cooker, 6-quart, 1,000-watt stainless steel cooking pot and exterior. Thanks again, everybody. And remember, I can't tell who bought what, so no worries there. Just click on the Amazon.com logo on our site the next time you feel like Amazon shopping. We greatly appreciate your support. And don't forget, you can also join the American Homebrewers Association or subscribe to Brew Your Own magazine through the associate links on basicbrewing.com. That's all until next time. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dotson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.